Retirement was supposed to be peaceful. Daniel Harper thought Maple Hollow would offer quiet mornings, newspaper in hand, and friendly waves from neighbors. Instead, it started with a missing box of vitamins. The first week passed like a postcard. Daniel's white colonial house sat at the bend of Rosewood Lane, where the cul-de-sac curved neatly around a ring of trimmed lawns. Each morning, he stepped onto his porch just as the sun burned through the last of the Oregon mist, mug of black coffee in hand, and settled into the creaky swing. The Maple Hollow Weekly, delivered without fail at dawn, rested on the armrest beside him. The pages carried more coupons and bake sale announcements than actual news, but it was part of the routine now, and Daniel appreciated routine. His realtor had promised a secure community with active neighborhood oversight. Oversight, as he would learn, took on a whole new meaning. A few days in, he noticed the first oddity. A small brown box that had arrived, vitamins for his joints, vanished sometime between his second cup of coffee and his afternoon walk. He chalked it up to a delivery mix-up. It happened. Maybe it got dropped at the wrong house. Maybe one of the neighborhood dogs got curious. He didn't want to make assumptions. Then it happened again. This time, a hardcover book he'd ordered. It was a history of Oregon's logging industry. Niche, certainly not valuable, but sentimental. Gone. And a few days later, a box containing hiking socks he'd ordered for the colder weather. The pattern became hard to ignore. Always small packages, always arriving, then disappearing within a few hours. Daniel asked around, casually at first. Tom, his next-door neighbor, didn't seem particularly concerned. "Porch pirates, probably," Tom said, not looking up from edging his already pristine lawn. "They get bold this time of year." Maria, who lived across the street, gave him a slice of pumpkin bread and offered a different theory. "You sure it's not just a mix-up with addresses? Happens all the time with these newer delivery drivers," she said, brushing flour off her apron. Still, something about it didn't sit right. Daniel had lived long enough to know when things didn't add up. He started watching more closely, keeping an eye on the street from behind the living room curtains. But Maple Hollow was quiet, almost too quiet. No teenagers loitering, no unfamiliar cars, just leaves tumbling across the pavement, the occasional dog walker, and the ever-present scent of chimney smoke in the air. 2 weeks after the last package vanished, the HOA held its monthly meeting at the community hall. It was Daniel's first. The room smelled of old carpet and strong coffee. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows. On the far side of the hall stood a long table with a sign that read, HOA Board. Behind it sat 4 people, but only one seemed to command the room. Karen Whitmore. Immaculately dressed in a pastel blouse and pearl earrings, Karen smiled as neighbors entered, but her eyes did not follow suit. Her name tag, printed in bold font, listed her role, package and property oversight. Daniel sat in the third row, next to Tom, who whispered that Karen had run things since 2016. About 20 minutes in, Daniel raised his hand and, as casually as he could, asked if there had been any recent issues with package theft. Karen's smile remained, but the temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. "Maple Hollow has been proudly theft-free for over a decade," she replied, projecting her voice just enough to be overheard by everyone. "But perhaps some residents would benefit from using secured delivery lockers or holding their packages at the post office." A few people chuckled. Daniel forced a polite smile. "It's just that I've had a few deliveries go missing since I moved in." She tilted her head slightly, like someone explaining simple math to a distracted child. "Did you check behind your porch railing? Sometimes they roll off. Or maybe squirrels." Laughter bubbled up from the back row. "And what exactly were these packages?" she asked, just a touch too sweet. Daniel hesitated. "Vitamins, a book, hiking socks." Karen's eyes flickered. "Ah, the one about Oregon logging? I've heard it's quite dry." He blinked. He'd never mentioned the book's subject, not to anyone. Her smile returned. "Perhaps it's time we all reviewed the community's standard package protocols. We'll be emailing them again this week." Daniel said nothing for the rest of the meeting, but he watched Karen closely. Something about her was too smooth, too rehearsed. He'd taught history for 30 years. He'd seen enough student presentations to recognize when someone was covering a lie with confidence. As the meeting ended and neighbors shuffled toward the door, Daniel gathered his coat. He didn't realize someone had come up beside him until a voice spoke low. "You're not the first to lose things here." It wasn't paranoia if the packages kept disappearing, and Daniel had run out of excuses. He stood on his porch one crisp morning in mid-October, the porch swing creaking softly beneath him, watching a squirrel wrestle a pine cone across the neighbor's lawn. Steam curled from his mug of cider as he stared at the bare spot where yet another package had been hours earlier. This one was supposed to be thermal gloves. He hadn't told anyone. He hadn't even checked the delivered email until 20 minutes ago. Yet it was gone. Maria had stopped by the day before with a tin of cinnamon scones and one of her trademark updates. "That Karen lady's always walking her dog right when deliveries come," she said casually, wiping sugar from her fingertips. "Funny timing, don't you think?" Daniel hadn't thought it was funny then. Now he couldn't unhear it. After yet another eye roll of a conversation with Officer Miller, who'd offered little more than a board, maybe try one of those app-connected smart doorbells, Daniel went with his own solution. A basic doorbell camera from the local hardware store. Nothing fancy. It clipped to the siding and came with a grainy live feed and a single backup battery. Good enough. He didn't trust the cloud or facial recognition. He just wanted to know if it really was the squirrels or something with two legs. The following morning, he reviewed the footage. At exactly 1:46 p.m., a figure passed in front of the camera. The video was blurry, almost useless, but he could make out the motion of a hand reaching down, a blur where the box had been, then gone. The frame after that caught a flash of fabric, blue and white, and something that looked an awful lot like a scarf fluttering in the wind. It wasn't enough. He sighed and shut his laptop, then glanced at the flyer on his fridge. Fall Harvest Market, Saturday only, local crafts, live music, cider. He hadn't planned on going, but now he needed air, and possibly a distraction. Maple Hollow's downtown square looked like a postcard. Hay bales framed the sidewalk, pumpkins lined up in tidy rows, and the scent of hot cinnamon and cloves hung heavy in the air. Children in flannel jackets tugged their parents toward candy stalls, and bluegrass music twanged gently from a corner bandstand. Daniel wandered past candle vendors and woodcarvers, nodding politely. Then he saw the booth near the petting zoo. Whispering Pines Wildlife Rescue, Education and Adoption. Behind the table, adjusting a display board, was a woman in a faded green vest with wind-tossed silver hair and a badge that read, Linda. He stopped. "Linda Evans?" he asked. She looked up, squinting for a second before her eyes lit with recognition. "Daniel Harper. Well, I'll be. I thought you looked familiar." They hugged lightly, the kind of greeting shared by two people who hadn't spoken in over a decade, but carried a mutual fondness from long ago. Linda had once lived on the opposite side of Maple Hollow, back before her garden became a subject of HOA wrath. "I left after they fined me for planting tomatoes in April," she said dryly as they sipped cider by the booth's corner. Apparently, early planting disturbed neighborhood aesthetic continuity, whatever that means. Daniel chuckled. "They haven't changed much." "Oh, they've only gotten more polished. Who's on the board now?" He hesitated. "Karen Whitmore." Linda didn't even try to hide her grimace. "Of course." Daniel told her about the missing packages, about the meeting, about Karen's peculiar knowledge of his reading habits. She listened, arms crossed, brow furrowed. "She's always been calculating," Linda said. "When I was on the sustainability committee, she tried to block a rain barrel program because she thought barrels looked too industrial. It's all about control with her." They paused as a group of children passed by, squealing over a miniature goat in a straw pen. Linda smiled faintly, then glanced back at her display. "You know," she said, lifting the corner of a small crate, "if you really want to catch someone red-handed, you might need something more persuasive than video." Inside the crate, nestled in a soft cloth, was a small creature with bright eyes, a twitchy nose, and striking black and white stripes. "This is Pepper," she said. "Gentlest skunk I've ever worked with. We use her in schools. Doesn't spray anymore. Had her scent glands removed before she came to us. She's more cat than menace." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting I mail Karen a skunk?" Linda laughed, waving her hand. No, just thinking out loud. But sometimes the best deterrents come with claws, or at least the illusion of them." Daniel didn't say much more after that, but something had shifted. A spark lit behind his eyes. They said their goodbyes, and Daniel promised to stop by the rescue center sometime. As he walked back to his car with a paper cup of cider and a tiny pumpkin Maria had handed him earlier, he felt the cool wind pick up. Leaves scattered across the pavement. Somewhere behind him, a fiddle hit a high note, and laughter echoed through the stalls. That night, back at home, Daniel pulled up the doorbell footage again. He slowed the clip, frame by frame, until he reached the shadowy figure. He paused, zoomed, then leaned in closer. That's Karen's scarf. I'm sure of it. Some people mail letters. Daniel was about to mail a message. The air smelled like wood smoke and distant cinnamon. Maple Hollow was steeped in Halloween. Plastic pumpkins grinning from porch steps. Inflatable ghosts bobbing gently in front yards. And porch lights rigged with flickering orange bulbs. But none of it compared to what was happening in a weather-worn barn just outside town. The Whispering Pines Wildlife Center, once a horse stable, had been transformed into a gentle sanctuary. Inside, among rows of terrariums, wooden enclosures, and laminated information boards, Linda crouched beside a low crate, lifting the lid slowly. "Come on out, girl," she coaxed. A tiny head emerged. Black eyes blinked in the dim light, followed by a twitching snout and the soft shuffle of paws. Pepper stepped out like a princess on a red carpet. "She's curious," Linda said proudly. "Not even fazed by leaf blowers. We use her with kids, kindergartners even. She hasn't sprayed in years, no scent glands left. She's the gentlest thing on 4 legs." Daniel knelt nearby, watching Pepper sniff the floor, then curl up in a warm patch of sun. "You really think she'll be okay in the box?" "She'll be fine," came a new voice from behind them. Mike, in his 30s with shaggy hair and a hoodie that read, "Rodents Rule," wheeled in a plastic crate stuffed with packing materials. "I built half the travel containers in this place. Trust me, this'll be first class." On the workbench beside them sat the box. Matte brown, nondescript, size just right. Daniel had printed a label from an old Amazon order and taped it carefully across the top. In bold type, "Premium Aromatherapy Kit, Fragile." Along the side, they had punched air holes hidden under the barcode. Inside was a soft cloth bed and a tiny camera wired to Daniel's laptop. "I still think we should have gone with glitter," Mike muttered. "We're going for subtle," Daniel replied. "Not prom night." Back in town, Daniel's garage had become mission control. Old tools hung neatly on pegboards. A wooden table, scarred from decades of repairs and projects, now held camera feeds, extra batteries, a box cutter, and a ceramic owl with a lens hidden in one of its eyes. "This is where I feel at home," Daniel said, sipping from a chipped mug. "Workbenches, quiet plans, history in motion." Linda smiled. "You always were more strategist than soldier." That evening, they tested everything. Pepper climbed willingly into the box, curled into her bed like it was a nap pod, and blinked up at them calmly. Daniel leaned close and whispered, "Time to make history." Halloween morning dawned cold and clear. Maple Hollow buzzed with anticipation. Kids already dressed as superheroes, and skeletons zipped down sidewalks. Porches were covered in spiderwebs and hanging bats. Daniel stepped onto his own porch with a bowl of candy and a carefully sealed box. He placed it at the usual delivery spot, then checked the angles of both cameras. The doorbell cam showed a wide view of the steps, while the owl sat perched on a side table beneath a faded wreath, its unblinking gaze aimed directly at the package. He walked inside, slipped out the back door, and climbed into his truck parked down the block. Linda joined him a few minutes later, carrying a thermos of cider and a bag of popcorn. "Everything's set," Daniel said, checking his feed. "You look like a man about to launch a satellite," she teased. Daniel glanced at the time. "She's usually by around 2. They waited. Children passed by in costumes, waving at Daniel's empty porch. Mike texted from the Wildlife Center. "Pepper's a star today. Got 10 likes on her photo already." Daniel chuckled quietly but kept his eyes on the screen. At exactly 2 p.m., a white SUV rolled into view. Karen's Lexus, freshly washed, slowed near his driveway. She parked 3 houses down, never directly in front of his home, too obvious. She stepped out, dressed in pressed slacks, a pale sweater, and her usual scarf, now a burgundy plaid that caught the light. She walked casually up the street, eyes flicking left and right. As she reached Daniel's porch, she hesitated, then bent slightly, lifted the box, and examined the label. "Too easy," Linda muttered. Karen tucked the box under her arm, pivoted smoothly, and walked back toward her car, disappearing from view. Daniel lifted his phone and typed. Package picked up. Operation Skunk is a go. Karen opened the box, expecting a lavender candle. Instead, she found Pepper, and Pepper blinked first. Inside her spotless living room, the sun slanted through narrow blinds, casting perfect stripes across the cream rug. A jazz playlist played low from hidden speakers, and a vase of fresh lilies stood proudly on a glass coffee table. Karen, still in her work clothes, blush sweater, beige slacks, scarf neatly tied, set the package down with care. She walked into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of white wine, and returned to her latest prize. "Barbara, are you still there?" she said into her phone, setting it to speaker and balancing it on the armrest. "I'm here," Barbara's voice crackled faintly. "You said it's from that new neighbor?" Karen grinned as she reached for the box. "From Daniel's porch. I saw it sitting there for hours. Honestly, I was doing him a favor." "Karen, I thought it might rain." From behind a fence 3 houses down, Daniel and Linda sat in Daniel's old van, laptop perched between them. The camera feed showed a perfect angle. Karen on her couch, box on her lap, wine in hand. "She's too relaxed," Linda muttered, watching the screen. "She always is," Daniel replied, tapping record. Back in the living room, Karen carefully sliced through the tape with a letter opener, her fingers graceful, practiced. She opened the flaps, peeled back the tissue paper, and leaned in. And then she froze. Pepper lifted her head slowly, blinking against the light, her small black eyes locked onto Karen's. The scream that followed rattled windows. Karen leapt up, knocking over her wine, which splashed across the rug like a crime scene. She tripped over the ottoman and landed sideways on the couch, scrambling up again, shrieking into the phone. "There's a skunk in here! Barbara, there's a skunk in the box." "What do you mean a skunk?" "It was in the package, the one from Daniel's porch, the aromatherapy one." Linda chuckled softly. "Not quite lavender." Karen ran in circles, flapping her hands, trying to herd Pepper, who remained perfectly calm. The little skunk stepped gingerly from the box and began sniffing the fringe of Karen's $3,000 rug. "You need to call someone," Karen barked into the phone. "Animal control. No, wait, the HOA board. Wait, I am the board." Barbara said something inaudible, and Karen barked back, "No, I don't care if it's illegal. It's in my house now." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Did she just say illegal?" "She did," Daniel confirmed. The camera continued to stream. As Karen spun in circles and muttered into her phone, something else came into view behind her. On the built-in shelves that lined her living room wall, rows of small boxes and open packages sat in tidy stacks. A pair of men's hiking socks still in their packaging. A book with Daniel's name still taped to the back cover. A bottle of specialty shampoo. A custom doormat that read, "The Harpers." Linda leaned closer. "She kept everything?" "She's been collecting," Daniel whispered. Just then, Pepper sniffed her way to a velvet pillow and curled into it. Karen, catching her breath, fanned herself with the HOA newsletter and paced in a circle, muttering, "I didn't steal. I redirected. That's not the same. It's just neighborly package redirection." Daniel and Linda grabbed the pet carrier and climbed out of the van. As they approached Karen's house, they saw Maria and Tom already stepping out of their doors, drawn by the noise. Daniel knocked. The door flew open. Karen stood there, red-faced, eyes wild, still holding the newsletter. "You," she gasped. "We heard a commotion," Daniel said calmly, gesturing to the carrier. "Thought we might offer assistance." "That animal, your animal, it attacked me. I believe she napped on your rug." Linda added, "She's licensed and certified for education. No claws, no scent glands, just a big fan of throw pillows." Karen opened her mouth, closed it, then stepped back. Take her, and go." Daniel walked in, crouched, and held out the carrier. Pepper stood, stretched delicately, and walked right in. The moment was serene. The calmest creature in the room was the one with fur. As Daniel turned to leave, Tom's voice came from behind. "Hey, are those mine?" The HOA emergency meeting had donuts, lukewarm coffee, and a rising sense of long overdue justice. The folding chairs creaked under shifting weight as neighbors filled the community hall, voices hushed and eyes darting toward the front. A banner still hung from last week's fall potluck, now slightly crooked. Together, we grow. The bulletin board nearby displayed notices about leaf disposal and gutter cleaning deadlines, as if any of that still mattered today. Daniel sat quietly in the second row, a USB drive in his pocket, and Linda beside him, sipping from a mismatched mug that read, "World's Okayest Board Member." The room buzzed, not loud, but tight, like the hum before a thunderclap. Karen arrived 10 minutes late. She wore oversized sunglasses indoors and clutched a thick binder labeled Incident Records. Her posture was rigid, chin lifted slightly too high, as if daring anyone to acknowledge what they all already knew. She took her seat at the board table, avoiding eye contact, and began leafing through her papers with rehearsed precision. Officer Miller stood off to the side, arms folded, his expression unreadable. He looked more engaged than usual, though that wasn't hard. His presence had been requested to oversee any legal misunderstandings. His eyes met Daniel's briefly, then nodded once. "We'll call this special meeting to order," said Ron Keller, the HOA secretary, his voice too soft for the crowd size. Agenda Item 1, Allegations regarding member conduct. Karen stood abruptly, binder under one arm. "Before we begin, I'd like to state for the record that I am the subject of a targeted smear campaign. This community has always relied on structure, on vigilance. My actions, however misconstrued, were in the spirit of maintaining order." "Is that what you call it?" Maria muttered loudly from the back. Someone near her chuckled. Daniel stood without drama. He walked to the small projector stand near the coffee table, inserted the USB, and tapped the space bar. The screen flickered, then steadied. First came the footage, Karen opening the package. The scream, Pepper's gentle exit onto the rug. Then the words, clear, undeniable. "I got it from Daniel's porch." Next clip, the wide shot of her living room, shelves lined with opened boxes. Karen pacing, fan in hand, muttering about package redirection. The murmurs turned into low gasps. Tom leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "Wait, is that the blender we gave Mark for his wedding?" "Lucy," Maria whispered, gripping her friend's arm. "Your baby blanket." Karen's face tightened. She stood again, lips trembling, but voice sharp. "These are misunderstandings. I often collect packages left unattended. I intended to return them." Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just clicked pause on the moment Karen clutched her pearls, clearly startled, as Pepper strutted across her rug. Officer Miller cleared his throat. "Legally speaking, this doesn't meet felony theft requirements, yet. But this is a civil matter, and a community one. HOA bylaws are clear about board member conduct." Ron adjusted his glasses. "Motion to vote on Karen Whitmore's status as board member?" The room didn't hesitate. "All in favor?" Hands went up, a wave of quiet resolve. "Opposed?" Silence. Karen gripped her binder tighter, then for a moment looked less like an authority figure and more like someone caught in their own unraveling. "I just wanted some control," she said softly. This place was slipping. Late trash cans, decorations before regulation dates, mismatched porch lights. It was all falling apart. No one responded. The silence held her words like fragile glass, then let them shatter. Ron turned to Daniel. "There's now an open seat on the board. You've shown great composure and fairness. Would you consider—" "I appreciate that," Daniel interrupted, "but I'm not looking for a seat. What I am looking for is community, real community." He stepped forward and held up a simple flyer, printed on recycled paper, with a sketch of a mailbox and a set of watchful eyes. "Neighborhood porch watch," he said. "Volunteers, rotating shifts. We don't need more rules, we need more trust." Applause broke out, not raucous, but steady, approving. Tom clapped with surprising enthusiasm. Maria leaned over to Linda and whispered, just loud enough, "She thought skunk meant karma." Linda grinned and passed out more flyers from her tote bag. The one on top had Pepper's face in the corner, smiling like she knew something no one else did. Maple Hollow smelled of cinnamon, nutmeg, and, for once, trust. A breeze swept through the streets, rustling leaves into cheerful swirls and carrying the scent of pies cooling on windowsills. Daniel sat on his porch that crisp November morning, a thick sweater over his flannel shirt, boots resting on the railing. Corn husks danced lazily from the bundle tied to his post, and gourds lined the steps like a lazy autumn parade. Across the street, 2 cardboard boxes sat undisturbed on the Jenkins stoop, unattended, untouched, and no one seemed worried. That, more than anything else, told Daniel the tide had turned. Karen's house, once the most scrutinized on the block, was quiet now. Sold 2 weeks earlier to a young couple with a toddler and a golden doodle named Moose. They'd painted the shutters a deep blue and added wind chimes that tinkled gently at night. The only oversight happening now came in the form of neighborly smiles and shared recipes. Linda arrived a little before noon, parking her pickup in front of Daniel's place. A thermos of cider under one arm and Pepper cradled like royalty in the other. The skunk wore a soft sweater that read, "Security Ambassador," stitched in looping red thread. "Fashionable and functional," Linda joked, setting Pepper down carefully in a pet bed lined with hay in the back seat of a wagon. They made their way to the park, which had transformed into a tapestry of warmth and tradition. Tables were set with patchwork cloths, pies and casseroles steaming beneath foil, and a bluegrass band strummed gospel hymns near the gazebo. Children darted between folding chairs and food booths, chased by the scent of roasted turkey legs and kettle corn. Linda's Wildlife and Respect booth was already drawing a small crowd. Kids knelt to peer at Pepper, cooing and giggling as she sniffed fingers and snuggled into her blanket. "She's a celebrity now," Daniel said, watching a little boy ask if Pepper knew kung fu. "She does know how to bring down tyrants," Linda replied. Daniel roamed for a bit, sipping cider from a paper cup, his steps easy. He was mid-bite into a slice of pecan pie when someone tapped his shoulder. It was Lucy, the neighbor whose baby blanket had turned up on Karen's shelf. She handed him a pie tin wrapped in gingham. "From everyone," she said. "Thank you for reminding us what community looks like." He blinked, genuinely surprised. "I just nudged the cart a little." "You steered it back on track," she smiled, then disappeared into the crowd. Later, under the wide limbs of an old oak near the edge of the park, Daniel and Linda sat on a quilt, sharing leftover biscuits and laughter. Pepper dozed between them, her tiny paws tucked under her chin. "Hard to believe it's only been a few weeks," Daniel said, watching Tom chat with new neighbors near the cider station. Linda nodded. "You'll be surprised how one act of nerve can change a whole street." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then a voice called out. A man in a denim jacket approached, holding his daughter's hand. "Mr. Harper, right? We just moved into 44 Rosewood. I heard about what you did with the HOA and the skunk." "Thank you." Daniel smiled modestly. "Welcome to the neighborhood." The man hesitated. "So, what's next for the skunk whisperer?" Daniel chuckled, reaching down to scratch Pepper's head gently. "Hopefully, nothing, but I'm keeping the owl calm, just in case." After all the commotion, Maple Hollow found its rhythm again, one where porches were safe, neighbors waved a little longer, and trust lingered like chimney smoke in the autumn air. Daniel never asked for recognition, but sometimes the quiet ones remind us how powerful a steady hand can be. When people stand together with courage and care, even the smallest gesture, like a box with a message, can restore balance. Justice, it turns out, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives on soft paws and leaves behind a lesson that sticks. So, if your porch feels a little brighter today, maybe it's because someone, somewhere, decided to protect more than just their own front step.